And welcome back to another daily devotion. I'm Pastor Roy here at Woodlawn Christian Church in Lake City, Iowa, and this devotion is for Wednesday, March 22nd of 2023. We are working our way quickly through the month of March, and we're working our way quickly through the book of 1 Corinthians. We are in the 9th chapter. Today we're going to look again at a pretty good chunk of scripture. We're going to look at verses 8 to 18. It's really a continuation of what we talked about yesterday. So you might want to go back and listen to that one as well. We will probably finish chapter 9 tomorrow. So again, we are in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 8 to 18. So let's just jump right in and take a look here. Do I say this on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it is treading out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not speak entirely for our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher should thresh in hope of a share in the crop. If we have sown spiritual good among you, is it too much if we reap your material benefits? If others share this rightful claim among you, do not we still more? Nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in the sacrificial offerings? In the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. But I have made no use of any of these rights, nor am I writing this to secure any such provision. For I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. If I preach the gospel, that gives me no ground for boasting. For necessity is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this of my own will, I have no reward. But if not of my own will, I am entrusted with commission. What then is my reward? Just this, that in my preaching I may make the gospel free of charge, not making full use of my right in the gospel. Okay, there is an old saying that we're in it for the outcome, not the income as pastors. But what Paul is saying here is that in the law, in the Old Testament, there is provision for taking care of the laborer. And if it is, in this case, it's a spiritual labor, those that are taking care of the spiritual well-being of the flock, as we say. So he's saying that they have a right to being taken care of, and God has laid down that provision from the very beginning with the priest sharing in the sacrificial food, and so that he uses that as a point of reference here to prove his point. But the point that Paul is saying is that he has not been taking any income from the church in Corinth. And we see Paul's humanity here, and it's kind of, Paul always gives us some of these things we kind of scratch our head or chuckle, one or the other or both, where he says, "For I preach a gospel that gives me no ground for boasting, for necessity is laid upon me." I'm start back. He says, "For I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting." He's boasting because he can preach the gospel. You're not supposed to boast in anything but the Lord, Paul. So that's, we have to point a finger at Paul and say, now, Paul. But his point is that he wants to be able to say, I do this because I have to. And it's kind of like that old thing where I oftentimes say, do you live to eat, or do you eat to live? And I always say, I eat to live. I don't live to eat. Now, there are people out there that we call foodies that are really into, and my son and his girlfriend, they're more of foodies because they really want this experience of the food. And of course, he's a chef. He's a professional cook. He's a very, very fine chef running a restaurant down in Florida now. But for him, food is an immersion, an experience, and that's not what food is to me. That's not the relationship I have to food. To me, food is I eat it to stay alive. And it's the same way with the scripture. Paul's saying, do you live to preach, or do you preach to live? You don't preach to live. Don't preach just for the income from it, but rather you preach because you're driven to preach. And really, that's it. I live to preach. This is what I plan to do till I'm not capable physically of doing it any longer. Because to preach and to teach. the scripture, because that's what I feel called to do. And that's what Paul is saying. That's what he's called to do. And he literally does it. He preaches and teaches up till the very end when he is, whatever state he is, and when he meets his end in Rome. We don't know exactly how his demise comes about, but we believe that Paul was executed in Rome, though some, again, I've mentioned before, believe he went on to Spain, but I don't think that happened. But I digress. But here he's getting at that he hasn't called that in there, but that doesn't mean called in this need to support him. But he is being supported probably by the Thessalonian church at this point, in some regard. But he also does work as a tent maker from time to time, at least. And so Paul is a means of, he's more or less a bivocational pastor at that rate, which is becoming more common, unfortunately, as churches shrink in size. It is unfortunate if the churches aren't able to provide for a good pastor. And sadly, that's getting more difficult to do, is to find a good pastor, because there's so many empty pulpits around the country, and we need to pray for those people. We need to pray for those places, that they can find a spiritual leader that can give them guidance, can preach the gospel to them, not rewrite the gospel. There's too much of that going on either. But I think that's all I've got for you today. We will deal with the rest of chapter 9, verses 19 to 27, I believe, tomorrow, unless I change my mind between now and then. All right, if you enjoy these devotions, if they gain anything from them, please do like and subscribe. We'd love to have you back again. And if you'd like to share any of them, please do. We'd love to have you do that as well. We'd love to have more folks coming to see us. Have a very blessed day, and please be a blessing to someone today. Preach the gospel to them. Tell them about Jesus and how much he loves them. Take care, and God bless you all.